And I will ask to Mr. Paul Malone to present his report. We cannot answer the questions tonight. Write them down and you will receive the answers to your questions probably tomorrow. Mr. Maloney. Is Mr. Dickinson here? In this case, he could take Maloney place. No, he's there.
Whether the image of the shroud is singed, scorched, if it would not be involved in the fire of 1532. Many experiments have demonstrated that at about 650 degrees centigrade, the container opens itself. Presumably, the lining of the box was not in silver, but in a bind, silver lead band, which can melt at about 500 degrees centigrades. At this temperature, inside the container, there are 155 centigrade degrees, which go up to 180 during cooling, with water which is thrown on the burning box, and at 180 degrees the cloth takes on the typical straw yellow color. These are the data on the computer and the printer. Practical experimentations made in closed containers provided a significant table color heat of the cloth. Simulation, fire simulation. A linen cloth is folded in 48 foldings, the same way as the shroud when the shroud was in Chambéry. The numerous foldings do not overlap as to form a bundle with the same thickness. One angle is raised upper. The quenching water of the fire penetrated by the lid covered the cloth without, and the cloth is soaking. Now, through spectrometry, UV visible spectrum, it was possible to compare the values of aqueous solutions before and after soaking. 0.7 is the value of absorbance of the initial solution, 0.6 that after soaking. In order to define the quantity of fragrance soaked in the fabric, infrared spectroscopy is being done on the fractions of the chloroform. Now, as to the Chambéry fire, the experimental observation whereby allegedly there is a discrete temperature gradient inside the container, this is borne out by the FTIR microscopy of the cloth. IR spectra made on the threads of the upper layer show an oxidizing cellulose oxidation phenomena which is more advanced than the one present on the fibers of the last layer. However, in the bands of the region 160, 1650, 1670 centimeters. Now, these observations are in keeping with the photo-colormetric measures which provided luminance factors lower for the superficial layers of the folded cloth. So fibres, the darkness of fibres is more evident since oxidation was favored by the higher temperatures, which is why tones are more marked in the back and in the thorax, because these are positioned in the area in correspondence with the surface layers, second and third layer for the back and seventh and eighth layer for the thorax. So we may presume that the imprint is slightly singed because besides yellowing, it has undergone the accidental heat of 1532. Natural oxidation phenomena were observed in the aging both of the paper of herbarium and in the pages of an old book. In the two cases, stems of the herbarium of 1945, known as Volkrange images, and in the imprint, no presence of light or heat was found, only superficial contact between cellulose and the organic substances of the vegetal for the former and coloring substances for the latter. This is a curious characteristic. A good three-dimensional information of the imprint of the paint on the leaf, spectrum obtained with the infrared microscope concerning the imprint of the herbarium. This is the red position of the curve A curve, and the support paper B show a significant variation in the characteristics bands indicated at 3,450, 2,905 and 1,727 centimeters -1. This is carbon and the double bind with oxygen. This transformation might correspond to the first phase of slight oxidation of cellulose. As to the age of the shroud, it was established that the three samples taken for three laboratories come from a strip 70 per 20 millimeters instead of the dimension 70 per 10 millimeters, 300 milligrams weight. Now this is to be found in the photographic and video photographic documentation, in particular photographs at page 41, 50, 51 of the Paris Proceedings of 1989. The fragment of cloth is 81 per by 25 millimeters. It has an angle and the is 12 millimeters long. The missing part, which has a triangular form, this is the rise sample, is 13 by 41 millimeters long. The total weight is 478 milligrams. So a strip 70 by 20 millimeters is obtained. .300 milligrams of weight. The strip is divided up into two uneven pieces or parts. These are the 300 milligrams. Next. So as you can see, there are two different parts. The smallest part of 144 milligrams is further divided in three uneven parts. So 52, 52.8, 53.7 milligrams. But the third piece of 53.7 is made up of two fragments of 39.6 and 14.1. This fourth sample was obtained by a standby strip, the one which weighs more. From macro photographs from the Zurich laboratories, one of which is scaled in millimeters, we can see that samples are 12 by 19 millimeters long. that of 52 and 52.8 milligrams. The macro photo of the fragment, of the taxon fragment, the size is 9 by 6 millimeters. The fragment corresponds exactly to the third part of the sample of 39.6 milligrams, 9 by 19 millimeters. Those who think that these the data which are of measures and weights, the sample 7 by 1 divided into 3 parts. This is the theory, whereas for the second version, the subdivision in 3 fragments was performed on half of the part of the strip. Then the hypothesis of the anomalous age of the shroud is due to the radiocarbon enrichment caused by a neutronic flux on the part of the corpse. To this, the hypothesis of the oil absorbed by the shroud during the uncertain boiling in Berg and Brest to account for the cause of the age of the cloth. Is it possible that the neutron radiation of 2,000 years ago, or the threads of 1532 were dosed so as to predetermine a medieval age? Similar coincidence do not provide an answer. So we accept the method of radio datation with C14 after verifying at the Toronto laboratory the some threads of San Luigi d'Angiò. Some threads gave identical results that of nature, that is 710 years of age. However, we should also consider that the cloths of Nubie and the liturgical parament of San Luigi d'Angiò are different from the shroud because these were conserved in museums and they were not subject to what happened to the shroud, which is why some scholars think that recent pollutants were cooked in the linen fibers during the Chambéry fire, whereas others maintain that the 1532 fire might have reactivated the nuclear structure of the cloth, thereby making it younger. So what about the age, the actual age of the shroud? For a reliable answer, use was made of a very ancient linen fragment, and from these we obtained 3 samples, 2 of which been given to the Taxon laboratory and 1 to Toronto. The radio datation data turned out to be identical for Taxon 1,292 years, for Toronto 1,300. The third fragment, after having placed in a container at 180 degrees for 30 minutes, was newly radio dated. The cloth under examination passed from 1,292 years to 1,405 years. This contradictory datum is to be ascribed to the heat of a simulated fire. So a difference of less than 1 century has a relative value if referred to 2,000, whereas it is important if this is referred to 650 years ascribed to the shroud. If this difference in age of the cloth is possible during heating, it is also true that the shroud would have a number of years that they would be subtracted from the known ones. In this case, the shroud, besides not being bimillenary, would not even be the one appeared in the rear, because woven towards 1450, 15th century. However, the Chambéry fire do not make the cloth younger. Further results of radio datation made by Professor Renaudot. We are still waiting for these results on a linen cloth 2670 and woolen sample of the 7th century, and also a cotton fragment subjected to nuclear radiation at 1,500 meters at the point where the Nagasaki atomic bomb exploded. Then there is another verification on the implant for contact, cloth face contact. In this slide, the particular OR spectrum of the aforementioned cloth after heating, after thermal treatment, the spectrum between 1,500 and 1,800 shows a significant variation in the relations of the bands, of the characteristic bands between the image, the area of the image, which is in red A, and the white part or background B, which is devoid of the image. For the area of the image, there is an increase in the band at 1,640 with respect to the adjacent bands at 1,605 and 1,720. This experimental evidence in accordance with the hypothesis developed by Adler, whereby the yellowing of fibres is allegedly due to the appearance of chromophore groups with the characteristic bands of this frequency. Also, the average value of the luminance factor of some points of the cloth can be compared with the one discovered on the shroud by Professor Arthur and Sardo in 1978. Here we have the comparison, the luminance factors. From this we can say that the image on the shroud, the image is less visible than the one obtained on the experimental cloth, because average values are higher than the one of our cloth. These slides show the present arrangement. Unfortunately, it is wrapped on a stick 4 centimeters diameters. On the basis of the experimental results, we suggest to have an expert in photometric and colorimetric techniques in the commission made up of Cardinal Saldarini. This would allow us to have an immediate comparison with the results obtained in 1978 on as many as 71 areas of the shroud. We would know whether differences in intensity of the color and of the image on the background are grounds for concern. It would be inconceivable to abandon work started 15 years ago, which is so important. Thank you for your attention. The speaker was going too fast.